Craveable Podcast, Episode 8, Local Harvest Angus Beef, Part 2.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the Craveable Podcast, where real matters. We are your hosts, Ben and Katie, and the show is brought to you by Fossil Farms. This is Episode 8, Ocho, and we will be continuing our discussion on Local Harvest Angus Beef.
Yep, that's why we're wearing the same clothes.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Where do we begin on our journey through Pennsylvania and leaving these pristine farms?
That's where we begin.
Well, I lay my little head to rest in the hotel room that we stayed at, and we had a pretty decent dinner and 2 or 3 pretty good cocktails, and we thought we were going to have to get to the plant at 8 a.m.
Oh, this is
and
great.
This is where the adventure begins, because we find out we have to be at the plant at 6 a.m., so I immediately changed my alarm and my plans and check my anxiety, and we wake up at the crack of dawn to go to a Cargill processing plant. Cargill's a really big meat processor in the United States. They probably have processing plants across the globe. And this is, despite the size of it and the scope that we ended up seeing, is actually like a small to mid-size processing plant.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd been here before. And after this visit, I'd had some conversation with friends who are vegans. Let's not talk about it. And then kind of go from there into like my opinions on beef, but whatever. What are your first takes on being in this processing plant? Because it's a megalith.
Yeah. So I had a lot of feelings before coming on this tour because many moons ago, and we must have touched on it on this podcast as of yet, but if not, Katie Flaxenhart, used to be a vegetarian.
Boo.
Yes.
Everyone in the room. Boo.
No. Everyone's allowed to have their own diets and beliefs. And I was a pescatarian, but when it started, it was like late middle school, I think. And it was for pretty much animal welfare reasons. So, I've been to our duck farms and our chicken farms, and I've seen everything from A to Z. And I've been
A to D, really. I mean,
okay. For ducks, deep in ducks. That's funny. Anyway, so it's always been like, okay, I don't love this part, the processing, but it's like, yes, I can absolutely stomach this and then some.
Necessary evil, right?
Yeah. And so I was I felt more than a little trepidation. Why? First of all, it's 6 a.m. It's very early to be in a beef processing facility. Not really. It's the normal time for them. But also I knew I was going to see the whole process, and hate to use this term, but I think we should try to keep this less
Let's just be honest. Let's be honest about what it really is.
Yeah. So we didn't have to see the kill floor if we didn't want to. And my knee-jerk reaction was, no, I don't want to. But I also told myself that no matter how I felt, I was going to. And I shared this with a couple friends and family who I mentioned the tour to before it happened. I said, listen, as a meat eater, I do not deserve to adopt the all too common American mentality of I'm completely separating this meat on my plate from the fact that it was once a living, breathing animal. And I find that people all around the country, probably around the globe, but definitely more so in this country, love to pull that separation trick. And I think that if you deserve to eat the meat on your plate, if you're going to do that, you need to acknowledge where it came from and what happened to put it there.
1,000,000,000% agree.
So I was going to force I literally thought, even if I have like a visceral reaction to this, like I can't sit here and promote, these awesome farms who produce these great animals, who give us this amazing product in the best way possible. I don't deserve to do that, let alone eat that product, if I can't stomach to see the fact that this was once an animal and you're going to literally see it through the whole process.
Exactly. And I think we'll work our way, we worked our way backwards through the plant from the finished product all the way back to the kill box. And I forget the exact name of the way that they do the shoots to get up into the kill box.
Oh, we're going to start there? Start at the end?
Exactly. We'll start at for them, what's the beginning, right?
Yeah.
And so Local Harvest, the way that they separate the cattle is they actually take all those cattle in the morning and they process everything from that specific program so they know it's separate from it.
Well,
and to just quickly touch on the quality of the program itself, a lot of the farms actually, and if you understand the difference between like choice, prime, select beef and things like that, the program, a lot of these farmers actually end up having their carcasses grade upwards of like 30% of the carcasses are graded prime, which is crazy because I think it's less than 4% of all the beef produced in the entirety of the United States grades out at prime.
I just want to clarify something. When Ben says the program in this program, he's talking about the Local Harvest program that we work with, which is not all the cattle that this plant produces.
Yes.
So as Ben just put it, they produce these cattle, the Local Harvest, all natural, hormone, antibiotic free. They produce them first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
So they are going into a completely clean plant with no other types of cattle that have been processed.
Exactly. No mixing and matching, anything like that.
So when the cattle arrive at the processing plant, they are basically kept in a nice housing unit with plenty of fresh water available to them to kind of just make sure they chill out. Again, I don't know how much detail we should go into with this.
I'm going to go into a lot of detail.
Really? Okay.
I think it needs to be said.
Okay. I'm fine with it, but
yeah.
So then I'm just taking this. So then they're basically in a corral and, they look totally fine. They're totally chill. And then they have pretty much a walkway, which is it's not crazy, but it like kind of winds so that each animal doesn't see what's going on in the animal in front of them.
Right.
And then it's just a very, very quick stun process involving a bolt that, it ends their lives instantly and painlessly. And I think that's pretty much the most humane way that you can do that for a beef cow.
Yeah. They walk up a ramp and then there's a slight turn in it to go down. So as Katie pointed out that they can't see, and then it goes into what they call the kill box. And it's essentially, and because I think it's really I have a morbid fascination with it. And I think it's important to know because you want to see that the animal is dead instantaneously. So they have these like little rubber sidings that holds them in place. And there's a big, not like a wire, but a cord essentially attached to this bolt gun, really big bolt gun, air pressurized, and they hold it over the head right between the temple, and it just goes poosh. And then the cow falls over and is dead. And then the next one rolls in and they go through, they do several hundred head of cattle a day, several thousand per week. It's its own mini genocide, if you want to call it that. That's fine. My words, not yours. And then they go from there and they're dragged out and then they're hung up and bled. And they're bled over these grates, and then they get stripped of their skin, which is fascinating because they actually have a machine, these clamps that hold on. They cut down an incision, grab the skin, and then a machine like yanks the hide back off of them.
I really don't think we need to go into this much detail.
No, because it's all part of the same thing. I think it's important for people to understand where they're getting their meat from, that this is a large animal, and it takes a lot of machinery to make it happen.
Can we insert a disclaimer at the beginning of this episode,
please? Trigger warning. And then they get eviscerated. The head gets cut off. They take that into processing. And this room is really warm. That's the thing that's really fascinating because it wasn't that warm that day, but I ended up having to take my coat off. I was sweating in there. And it's just that humidity from all the human beings in there and all the animals being slaughtered. The organs get separated on conveyor belts. The blood is saved sometimes for them to use for processing. Then the carcasses are hung. I don't know if they mentioned how many days they're hung. Part of me thinks it's like 3 to 10, something like that.
Oh, no, I think it's like 2.
Yeah. And then they break those down on conveyor belts. And the whole thing is super efficient and fascinating.
And I mean, my favorite part by far, once we leave the kill room, which Ben fancies so much, is when they're breaking down the half cows. So, I mean, I could have stood in that room for an hour. So the half cow comes in, and then so every single employee in this entire room. I don't want to watch them die.
I just want to see them get cut up.
Ha 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 ha. Anyway, every single employee in this room has 2 things. Well, most of them on the majority of one part of the room. They have a knife in one hand and a hook in the other. And basically, every single person has a different job. They use the hook to grab whatever they need to work with, and then the knife to obviously do that work. So the first couple portions are splitting that half cow down into about like 4 primal sections. And then there is a giant portion of the room that has 4 double-sided conveyor belts. So there's employees stacked on either side of each of the 4 conveyor belts. And then like there's one conveyor belt that's just for the rib section and one conveyor belt that's just for the loin section. And so like I was looking at the loin section and it was so freaking cool. Like there is someone whose job is just teres majors, and their job. So there's 2 conveyor belts. There's like one on their level, like let's say counter level. And then there's one like maybe 2-3 feet above that. So this person's job is just teres majors. So they have to be just constantly looking while they're working to see
which comes
if
out of
there's
the chuck also. The shoulder, essentially.
Yeah. So they're looking for that piece to be coming down the line. And every time they see one, they hook it and then they like put it next to them in the pile. And then their job is that they take it, they trim it. They do like obviously some pieces just in general come more trimmed than others, but they do whatever that, high level trimming is that's needed of them. And when they're done, they throw it up on the top conveyor belt and then it goes down to be packaged. And there's somebody else who's just looking for tenderloins and they just hook it, and they hook all the tenderloins, and they trim it, and then they throw it up on the conveyor. And there's sharpeners at every single station, so you'll see them just sharpen the knife. If you're righty, I guess, yeah. And then it was just fascinating to me, like the speed and accuracy and everything that they needed to employ.
It's that all day. Mm-hmm. These people really work super hard. This is true red-blooded American blue-collar work.
Yeah. And I mean, I took a lot of solace in knowing that virtually every part of the animal is used. So, before you get to that room, of course, you've got like the organs and the head and the hide and all that, and it's all used. They even have, I'm pretty sure they said their own tanning facility for the hides, which was down on a level that we didn't see. Yeah. But so they tan them right there. The blood is used when it's edible. I forget. I'm sure that all the blood from the local Angus cattle is edible,
that's totally different because they process all types of cattle. Like there's tons, especially in the middle of Pennsylvania, lots of dairy cows, older dairy cows get pushed into these programs, and that actually ends up just mostly getting ground into burger meat, literally. For a redheaded lady, you might know her.
Goodness.
Think about it.
Don't read into that. Just said the opposite thing. But yeah, so like and I asked the question, I was like, okay, so what if the tenderloin guy misses a tenderloin? What happens? So, there's a whole other section of the conveyor belt where, there's a guy whose job it is to grab, export ribs and top rounds.
Bone-in ribeye.
Yeah, bone-in ribeyes and top rounds and things like that. And then throughout the process, there's like little bits, like all the trim. Like there's little bits that get put onto separate conveyors. And by the time you get to the end, there's a couple people in the line that are just sorting the trim, into different buckets of where it's going to go and things like that. And, so my question, I was like, what if tenderloin guy misses a tenderloin? And the answer is like that tenderloin will come down the line and everyone who's looking for what they're looking for will know not to take that. And then it will just go back up the line and end up coming down again. And from what I saw, that does not happen often. Because I didn't really see any of that.
It's a refrigerated space, just so everybody's aware.
Yes, refrigerated space. That's a good point. But then there's like, let's say flank steaks, for example. Let's say there's 4 in a package. So there's another line of people who have the cryovac bags, and almost, this is how I described it, but like, you're like, let's say you're at a rest stop and you're going to like a fast food joint, and they have like the heated display of ready to go things, and it's like hot, just like levels of like
don't look at me,
shoots.
bro. I don't know what you're talking about.
It's like, just like shoots. It's like, okay, this is a shoot where I can get like my bacon cheeseburger. That's
right. Yeah, like they slide the sandwiches down.
Yeah, exactly. So like way fancier than that, and high tech and cleaner.
Yeah, put a bag on.
And so there's like a person who is on the bagging side, and they have the bag with the shoot, and then there's other people on the back side who are taking the flank steaks, and when they have 4, then they push it down, and then that person takes the bag and they put it in the sealer. And then there's also bags that the seal didn't take and it was improperly cryovac. They come around, and then somebody rips open the bag, throws the bag away, and puts the meat back on the conveyor that will go to be cryovac'd. thought that was very fascinating.
The whole thing is interesting. And then I don't know if you noticed, because I don't think they mentioned it, but did you remember when we'd come into, like, let's say the room is like going this way. We're right here. We came around that back corner and it was that really large metal container, basically. And then we walked up onto the catwalk over the conveyor belts. That is the water cooling system that they have. So they vacuum seal the bags and then they go onto another belt that goes through this water system. We get them really cold really quickly. That way they can get them under refrigeration as fast as possible. And that's just so fascinating because the amount of carcasses getting processed it's a pretty big room, but if you think about the amount of work being done, because they're pretty close to each other, it's nuts how much processing they're doing in this one little room. And there's, 5-pound chunks of ground that are going through this thing. The whole thing is just an extremely efficient machine. It's fascinating.
And one of the gentlemen who took us on the tour was the manager of the fab room, the fabrication room, which is what we're describing now, where the primals are being fabricated into smaller cuts. And he said, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he said he's like 20 to 40 people short every day.
Every single day.
On a daily basis. And I was like, what do you...
Yeah, since COVID. Super hard to find work.
Yeah, like how...
For workers.
And it's just like regularly scheduled time off or people calling out or just being short, but it's supposed to be a 200-man operation in that room. And he was like, yeah, every day. No, every day without fail. Like 20 to 40 people short every day.
Yeah, they have hundreds of employees, but still percentage-wise, it's enormous how many people aren't working. People have moved on to other things. The plant had troubles during COVID, but they never truly shut down. I mean, that's the struggles that the meat industry in general is still bouncing back from COVID, but that'll be a totally different episode maybe, or never.
We like to pretend that never happened. But so then, I don't want to say obviously, but as you might think, a ton of this product is ending up going into trim. And so there's these huge, big vats, buckets of trim. And then they go through another process where this guy, and I know part of this was testing for metal, but there was something else. And he was like wiping the trim with like a special cloth. To check for some type of contaminant, and then it goes into the whole big bucket goes into a machine that like double checks to make sure there's no foreign objects in there, contaminants, like definitely no metal. And then when it passes through that, it gets fully sealed and they date it, and they have colored date stickers. So, Monday's red, Tuesday's green, etc. And then we went into their cold storage for that product, which was crazy.
Humongous.
It was like half of a Costco with just, and I mean, it wasn't full, obviously, because they don't keep that much on
literally
hand.
like a Costco, like that height as well.
Yeah.
All refrigerated.
And they told us that, their employees are instructed to, when they're going and grabbing buckets for grind, the first thing they look at is the date. Okay, what, is there anything in here that's, a day or two old that needs to be used now? And is it, and I think this is interesting too, because like we talk about, it's kind of a segue, but we often talk to both friends, customers, people talk to on a daily basis about the shelf life of things, right? And it's just insane when you think about it from the start, because this meat, like it can be sitting in their facility for like probably up to 3 days before it even gets processed into trim. So,
or ground from a trim product.
Ground, sorry. Yes. Thank you, Ben. Before the trim gets processed into ground. And, of course, ground products have a shorter shelf life because of the surface area, and that makes it more easy for...
And it's heated up by being ground and then recooled.
Exactly. But I just think that's very interesting because obviously so much happens between, the farm and the grocery store and your plate. And, we sometimes think, I don't know. I don't know. My point is, I guess it's that it has a longer shelf life when you look at the entire process.
I think you just find it fascinating.
It's pretty cool.
When you start at the farm one day beforehand, and then you see the cattle come in, and then by the end of it, you see literally the finished muscle product that gets put into shrink wrap at a ShopRite or Whole Foods or whatever it might be,
or at a Fossil Farms.
Yeah, sure. We'll plug action. Why not?
But no, it was super cool because we saw we did see a part of the cows that were coming to us get processed. And that was really cool. It was like, okay, I'm used to seeing this package, in our warehouse like this. And I'm sitting here watching these guys cut it down, trim it, backpack it, cool it, make sure everything's perfect. And I think it's really cool. It's really fascinating. And I want to get back to you asking me about my opinion of it and me saying
Yeah, by the end of
that
it.
I was scared. So it was actually really not difficult at all for me to witness
really
the entire
clean,
process.
Clean facility.
Well, it's clean, but also
the
it's
only
like
dirty process is right in the beginning, is the first 5 minutes
But-
after slaughter.
yeah, but even that, I don't know, it shockingly wasn't that hard for me at all. So not nearly even half as hard as I was expecting it could be. And I think that's because it's done quickly and it's done right. And it's not like, and I'm not throwing any shade at all, but like I'm pretty positive that a big part of halal processed meat is that the animal is strung up and it bleeds out by a cut on its throat.
Yeah.
And like that would be pretty brutal to witness. And that's not what happens at all here. And I don't know, it was really interesting and eye-opening. And I know that a lot of us, like our most senior salesperson said after that trip, he's like, I probably won't actually do this, but like, it almost made me consider like not eating beef.
Right.
And it's like, I didn't feel that way. But it puts everything into a entirely different field of perspective.
Right. Because again, this is a mid-tier, if not a small processing plant. There are plants in this country, like let's say this Cargill plant does maybe 7,000 head a week, I think was that sounds about right?
I thought, it was
or maybe a little bit less.
Yeah, I thought it was like 600 a day.
Yeah. So we'll say like 7,000 if they're really busy, if they have full capacity and workers. There's plants that are processing 10,000 head of cattle per day.
That's
per
insane.
day.
That's too many.
So I think that segues into the philosophy of beef eating in the United States. I mean, a big reason that I eat so much game meat is one, I work for Fossil Farms, and it's a huge benefit being able to access a lot of the venison and elk and et cetera. And I don't know if I've touched on this in other podcast episodes, but I really don't eat beef anymore. I don't want to eat beef. I don't want to be part of a larger commercial problem that exists with commodity beef, which is what most things are, and there's programs that work. Local Harvest is unbelievable. At the end of the day, for me, it ends up touching the commodity supply chain by going through a Cargill plant. We also carry Piedmontese beef, which doesn't do the same thing. And we also carry a great grass-fed Wagyu program from our partners in New Zealand at First Light. So there's lots of access to good beef. And I think Local Harvest checks every single box that you could be looking for as a consumer or as a chef or anything that you want to be like, I need this to be raised properly so I can put it on my plate. But I totally get where Ken was coming from when he said that, because you realize the scope of things when you move out of this small plant. This is happening at larger plants across the country to tens of thousands of dairy cows or animals that are on feedlots under the baking sun, literally 100,000 head of cattle. Can you picture it? Can you picture the acreage of animals of this, versus going to a pristine farm, drinking sweet tea in this dude's backyard, and he has 60 to 80 head of cattle raised the right way. There's a massive delineation of scope of these two things and of access to well-raised beef products. Like the employees that are working there, they get a discount. They get a really great discount on beef. They can take home, prime tenderloins for $8-9 a pound. That's crazy. But where's the beef coming from? What's it fed? How's it raised? Does it have hormones? Is it pumped full of antibiotics? And those are the unknowns. And those people, probably at the amount of money that they're making, the Local Harvest program is for a specific type of consumer. And that comes at a specific cost that's higher than normal, significantly higher than normal if you're only going by price chopper beef prices of like 99-cent ground beef. And that's a huge gap of where the beef industry is and where this niche is.
And I think, yes. And I think that ties into part of our points in the organic discussion of, there's obviously, I'm not going to I'm not gonna give up vegetables.
No, yeah.
But there's so many farms, and the organic is such a small part of it. And we discussed in that episode that the larger companies that are doing organic, I mean, it's not bad, but it's not the most helpful because it's such a small part of their business.
Right.
And the real controllers of the industry are the big players.
Yeah.
And the big players are all big ag. It's not all natural.
Literally.
It's not small family farmers. It's not, it's not Jonathan Campbell, and it's not Steve.
No, it isn't. It's not even just like Monsanto. Monsanto has a parent company. You know what I mean? And that's Bayer, the pharmaceutical company.
Well, I have to say,
New Jersey-based Merck pharmaceutical company owns one of the largest producers of turkey in the UK. I mean, this is conglomerates that we're talking about. And I think that kind of solidifies the point of why we're doing this podcast in the first place. So let me just talk about it for a second. There is a right way to eat food in really economical and great food systems in the United States and across the planet. And the accessibility is non-existent for the majority of people. And that's something we want to change. We want you to be really conscious of what you're putting in your body because it's important for the planet. It's important for you. It's important for us. For me, definitely. And it's so hard for people to gain access to that. But they're able to do so much. And yet it's not like we're changing things like one day at a time. And it's why it's so important for us to have this podcast to let people know what the ins and outs are of this industry, that it can be a little bit dirty, even amongst doing things the right way. But boy, could it be worse. Could be a lot worse.
Ben, I have to say that was a beautiful tie-in on your part. I mean, I think the most magnificent tie to satin bow you've ever done
so far.
And I want to just applaud you for that.
Appreciate it.
I think we're just about done here, but one thing I did want to add was I know that I and Ken and you and hopefully some of you listeners, I will think twice about ever accidentally wasting a piece of meat. I mean, Ken actually said, he's like, one thing that is changing today, my wife and I usually shop, every couple days a week, buy a couple packages of chicken. And sometimes, the schedule just is what it is. And every now and then one of them gets thrown out. He goes, I'll tell you what, I'm buying meat for dinner every day, the day I'm cooking it for dinner. And same thing for me. It's like I took a package of turkey out of the freezer and it's like, oh, I didn't get around to it. Oh, well, you're cooking it today because you don't have another choice.
Make it
happen.
Not waste.
You're really going to waste
waste
that?
the hard work
and the life of the animal.
Life. Don't waste your money.
Don't waste any of it.
You know what I mean?
Well,
if we had enough time, I'd call Ken right now and ask him if he's sticking to his pledge.
Ken, get on the podcast.
What do we got left?
But no, I mean, I don't want at all to seem like we're leading on a down note at all. I mean, Ben, you have a lot of opinions and I respect all of them. But I think the takeaway should be this awesome farm tour we had, this awesome facility visit, these incredible people who work so hard day in and day out and bust their behinds to give us and you access to an amazing, superior product that I am so glad exists, that you will be so glad exists if you try it. And I think that's all for me. Did you have any other closing notes, Ben?
No, I think that's it. I couldn't agree more. And these people work really hard. They work hard every day. It's an uphill battle, a Sisyphean task, right? If you will, rolling the boulder uphill against the tide of where conglomerates are pushing food. But every day is a fight. And I think we're doing the right thing. And I couldn't be happier to be a part of it, honestly.
Agreed. And well said. Again, you're just breaking records today. You guys, thank you so much for listening. We look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of our podcast, episode 9. What will it be about? Stay tuned to find out and like and subscribe.